and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 90th take live from Euless, Texas. I'm your host, as always, Bear Duplessis, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you, and I'm so excited. I'll be welcoming in our guest in just a moment. But before we do that, we have to thank the people that make this show possible, and that is, of course, our awesome sponsors. And tonight's show, of course, as always, is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate announced just a couple weeks ago the national release of Acid 20 to retailers nationwide. The chromed-out double-decade masterpiece was first showcased at the 2019 IPCPR trade show held in Las Vegas. Over the past 20 years, Acid has become a vital must-have brand within all sales channels of the cigar industry. To celebrate this tremendous milestone, they are honored to introduce Acid 20, a box-press Robusto, internally billed as their best acid release since Cuba Cuba. Acid 20 is wrapped in a lush, toothy Mexican San Andreas Capa with ultra-premium Indonesian binder and filler leaves from Nicaragua. With a subtle and evolving profile, blessed within a blend that is truly worthy of a double-decade title. And, of course, if you are watching us on Facebook Live or catching us on YouTube later, we really appreciate y'all for checking in. But if you are listening to wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, TuneIn, Podbean, or wherever podcasts are played, you are listening to us exclusively because of Cornelius and Anthony Premium Cigars. Cornelius and Anthony Premium Cigars is steeped in tobacco tradition. For over 150 years, the Bailey family has been a part of America's tobacco heritage, passionately caring for the land they cultivate in Keysville, Virginia. Cornelius and Anthony's devotion to the finest grown tobacco and foremost aspects of craftsmanship allows them to introduce the most exquisite cigars to the market. They invite you to enjoy their portfolio of handmade premium rolled cigars and experience their dedication to producing an exceptional product. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Take number 90. I'm so proud and, like I said, so pleased that you guys could join us tonight. This is going to be a sensational show, and I am just honored to have our guest this evening. And so I'm going to stop talking about it and just introduce him. And so without further ado, a Ventura Cigar Company, the wizard himself, the mad professor himself, God knows other nicknames over the last almost 4 decades in the cigar industry, Mr. Michael Giannini. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic, Bear. Thank you for having me on. The only thing that would be better if the Eagles were winning right now.
Yeah, what is the score? So since you're keeping an eye.
That is 17-12 Atlanta.
So okay. Well, okay, so they're still in the game. They're still in the game. It's all good.
Yes, they are.
It's all good. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. This is very cool. This Smoky Bear.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So like it's a perfect blend. It's a perfect blend of English and Spanish, which is basically who I am. So I love it. So but I really appreciate you being on tonight, Michael. And it's truly an honor to have you on. And so as you and I were kind of talking about before the show, I wanted to we're going to take a concept tonight and kind of pepper it around the Ventura cigar family. Because if, as I mentioned again before the show, if we sat here and talked about your amazing and illustrious career in the cigar industry, we'd be here for 4 hours. And while you and I might find that fun, and a lot of other people would find that fun, I do have to go to work in the morning. So do you. So that'd probably be a good call. But I wanted to, the theme we're going with tonight is the theme of legends. And now, as I've had the privilege of interviewing Steve Saka of Dumbarton Tobacco and Trust a few times, and he told me once that word gets thrown around a lot. In fact, he even said way too much in this industry. And when and I kind of pressed him on, I said, so who are the legends? And he named about 4 or 5 people. And the great thing about all of them is that you've worked with every single one of them in your nearly 40 decades of experience. And 2 of the ones that he mentioned specifically, of course, are Manolo Quesada and Benji Menedez. And those 2 are pretty prominent right now in what's going on at Ventura, because you guys have announced a collaboration at this past trade show with both of them. With
third, Ernesto Perez
and Ernesto Perez Carrillo, who was also mentioned by Steve. Exactly. So, and that's under the is that under the umbrella of the collaboration with Ernesto is under the Archetype umbrella, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Right. There.
And then the Menedez and Quesada projects are under the Cuban Cigar Factory. So tell us a little bit about, okay, so we you know, for people who've been smoking your Ventura cigars for a while, are familiar somewhat with the Archetype series. We'll get into the collaboration with Ernesto here in a second, but tell us a little bit about the cigar factory, the Cuban cigar factory, rather, and why these collaborations were so important to you.
So, can I tell you a quick story about legends? Because at one point in my career, this was probably 2002, I was working at General Cigar, and we actually had gone to Honduras. And at the time, we were there with the Coleman family and David Danziger, who was the VP of Sales and Marketing. And here's the guys that were literally looking at tobacco outside in the field. Estelo Padron, who is the brother Orlando Padron from Padron, Benji Menendez, Ernesto Perez Carrillo, and Daniel Nunez, who was the master of the universe throughout the Caribbean basin for General Cigar. And it was unique there in that literally I'm standing back looking at this and I'm like, oh my God, look at these four guys. And they're all fighting over the tobacco, who was going to get what for what brands or what blends. And it was pretty awe inspiring. So I love your topic tonight because I do agree with Steve. I mean, the legendary status of people are sometimes overinflated. But to answer your question about Cuban Cigar Factory was a brand that the Quesada family here at Ventura Cigar that owns Cretek, Phillips and King, and Ventura Cigar. They had bought this brand based out of San Diego, which is, if you go to Little Havana, you can walk into any of these little cigar shops that are making cigars, mainly for tours, but not a whole lot for production. And that's what this location is. It's still there. But, you know, at that time, it was purchased because of the really cool name and just a great name. So this was my first project when I came into Ventura in 2017. What are you going to do with this brand? I didn't think I was ever going to be able to create again after 2016 when the Demon Regs came down. So, you know, I had retired at that point because I wanted to create. And so I said, you know, I don't know right now, but let me think about it. So I'll never forget the story. I am it's Christmas Eve. I'm in Philadelphia, where I'm originally from. I am in the front of Walgreens at 4:30. They're closing at 5. And my last Christmas gifts had to be Christmas cards. And I'm like, geez, man, I got to go to a Christmas party. And if I don't call Benji tonight, I'm going to forget. And I'm not going to bother him on Christmas Day. And Benji, if you ever talk to him, he will never give you a 5-minute answer about anything, or it's never a 5-minute call. It could go on forever. And I'm debating this in my head. I'm freezing my butt off with a cigar in my car. I get the heat on. It's still freezing. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going to call Benji. So Benji, Merry Christmas to you and your family. I miss you. You know, same thing back. Benji, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm just here with my family. But what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just in my house. And when are you going to come see me? And I'm like, you know, I'm going to come see you, but it's not going to be in the next week because of the holidays. And it dawned on me, Benji, you're not doing anything. He goes, no, I am retired. Would you do a project with me? And he was like, Michael, I love you. I'll do anything that you want. And that's when Cuban Cigar Factory came to life, because what was unique for me, Bear, is, you know, Benji Menendez is a guy that I always admired. You know, when Partagas 150 came out, he was one of the guys. I'll remember it was Benji and I forget the gentleman's name, that were the guys that started this Partagas project. And here they are at a trade show, you know, a little happy from libations they were drinking, and they were playing the piano. And I'm like, I walked up to Benji, and he was not, you know, this is like 1 o'clock in the morning, and nobody was in this state to really like, oh yeah, hey, how are you? And I just went up, I just wanted to shake his hand. Then when I was a retailer, I wanted to go. They used to do this thing in Connecticut where you could actually take retailers up and you would see the tobacco, et cetera, which now Drew Estates does with their barn smokers, which is super cool. And, you know, I couldn't go. And I was pissed off because I saw one of my employees, he comes back and he's telling me about it. Like, bro, I don't want to know anything about this because you're just pissing me off. I really wanted to be there. I'm glad you had a good time. I don't want to hear about this. So it was the New York Big Smoke. I actually walked up. I'm like a little kid. I'm like, hi, Mr. Menendez. I just want to shake your hand. I just wanted to meet you. And he was just a gentleman, as he always was. So here we are. I'm at General Cigar, and our PR person says, what do you know about Benji Menendez? And I'm like, why do you want to know? Because he's coming to work for General Cigar. And years later, as I'm the head of innovations, I was putting together a team of people that where we were going to work on blends and packaging for the company. and Benji Menedez was my first draft. And so Benji would sit at my right hand every time we would be working on blends. And I literally would look over and I'm like, Benji, what do you think of this cigar? And he would just start talking. You go into this mind bubble. I can't believe I'm sitting here with Benji Menendez. And he actually reports to me, and which is bizarro. And he's helping me work on these blends. And I got this master of a guy. So all those flooding experiences happened in that moment, Bear. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know how many people know Benji Menendez. And I literally did an event in Morgan Hill, California on Friday. And I was telling the story about Cuban Cigar Factory. And I asked the crowd, it was probably about 75 people there, how many people know Benji Menendez? And only one hand went up.
Oh,
And
God, what a shame.
my heart. But I learned that when I first had this thought, I did not want this legendary guy to not be remembered. And another cool thing is there's a great song by Eric Clapton called Bell Bottom Blues, and in there's this it's a love song, but there's this line of I don't want to fade away, and that's been my passion for not letting Benji to fade away. So that was the beginning of this project 2 years ago, where I basically went to go see Benji, and I'm like, Benji, here's my thing. I want to put this passion project because, I love you to death. And there's a lot of people in this cigar industry that love you to death, but I need the next generation to know who you are. And I want to do this project, one, because I need to tell your story. You have a grand story that people don't know or have forgotten about. And secondly, it is my where I'm at in my career. I need to pay this back so the next generation can know who you are. And he's like, well, but I want to tape you and I want to get as many stories out as you as possible, Benji. And, hopefully, because these guys, this is a generation that doesn't want to tell any stories, doesn't want to write a book. I mean, it's either painful, they don't want to reminisce about their careers. And I'm like, well, then I'm going to do it for you. So he was in. My next challenge was Manolo Quesada. Now, my story at Manolo Quesada, back in the day during right when the cigar boom was happening, we had a cigar dinner at a retail store, and I was smoking 8x52, 7.25x54s, big cigars. I'm a younger guy, and that's what you smoke back then. And we had a cigar dinner for Fonseca, and we got introduced to 2x2s. And I had a bunch of friends that were friends of ours that bought at our store, and we were blown away by the 2x2s. So the next day, we basically sold out because everybody came to the store. That's the cigar they wanted. Well, who made that? This guy, Quesada. No idea who this guy was until I got into the industry and actually had great conversation with Manolo. And he was just this gentleman and an encyclopedia about cigars and his history. And I'm like, this is a guy I always wanted to meet and work with. So here I go to the DR 2 years ago, and I went in. Here's same story. Hey, I want to do this project with you, but there's a twist. Benji does not travel. He's basically in his house in Miami. I would love for you and Benji and I to work on a blend for Benji. But secondly, I want to put your name out with the same story. I want to tell your story because, again, you've been in the industry for 49 years. Benji's been in the industry 62. People have forgotten about your stories. I can't let that happen. So would you work with me on this? And, he starts to tell me his stories, but he's like, well, I don't really, I'll tell you stuff, but, it's not who I am. I'm like, what's with you guys in this generation? You're legendary cats that people look up to, and you don't want to tell your story. So I knew what I was dealing with. And that was the beginning of Cuban Cigar Factory. I thought a lot about how that would come down, Cuban Cigar Factory, and we could have put something out and, we've been blends by somebody, and it's just not what I do. I mean, this had a bigger, there's this great thing in marketing called reason to believe. And this was the reason to believe for me that if I get to work with these guys, one, I'm super honored that they even said yes. Secondly, I'm thrilled that I look up to these guys. And, there's a lot of guys like me in the industry that are personalities. But my life's goal is never to be, grow. I'm not any generation Cuban. I'm 100% Italian, first generation Italian American. I'm not going to spend my life in a factory. That was not my calling in life. I love going to factories. I love working with tobacco down there, but I'm not spending 364 days a year in a factory. It's just not happening. And so it's a different generation now, but I want to tell their stories. And that's how Cuban Cigar Factory came to life.
It's, that story about Benji is very heartbreaking. The fact that, a crowd of, probably, 75 probably well-learned people within the cigar industry, and they're all contemporary, and his time in the industry wasn't, didn't end so long ago, but his time, what he's done as a pillar of and foundation for this industry has been incredible. And the same can be said for Manolo Quesada. So was it anything? Was it something specific? Was it the factory or anything? Like what the we obviously you told us the genesis of wanting to work with Benji on that, and the fact that you guys worked together so closely in previous projects. What made Manolo the second, I guess, not obvious, but the second part of that was like, this is clear cut. I want to work with him.
Great question. So, Manolo and Benji, when you're in the industry, you kind of know these stories because I was always in the DR. And so the connection, which is, going back in my life to basically 1999, when I first was in a real cigar factory, was with Ernesto. And Ernesto's factory was based where Benji's factory was, Manolo Quesada's factory, in the free zone in the Dominican. And so the story is of, both Benji and Manolo were great tennis friends, and they would play every day after work, and they literally, their factories butted each other. And so Benji actually commissioned.
Did you say tennis? They played tennis together?
Yes. Can you believe that? And this was their thing. After work, they would go play tennis together. And when you ask them the questions like, who was the better tennis player, Manolo would always say, I was, because I was younger. This is the banter that these guys would have. But the real story is that they would try to at least, the main goal of the game was nobody could get zeros. So if you could win by not being shut out, then you it didn't matter what the score was in their mind. That's how they played tennis. And so they were asshole buddies, for lack of a better word. And, so Benji actually had Manolo make cigars for him when he was at Consolidated, which is now out to this, and God knows what it's going to be in a month.
Right.
So that was the connection. So knowing that these two were great, great friends, it just made sense for me to do that. Here's what I didn't know, Bear. Early part of this year, for the first time, Benji and Manolo hadn't seen each other in about 4 years. Manolo really doesn't travel to the station. When he does, he travels and comes back, and Benji basically doesn't leave Miami. And so I asked Manolo, would you come to Miami with me? Because I want to shoot a video with both of you guys. It would be such a kick in the ass for me and for the consumers as we tell your story. So Manolo, literally we started out back at Benji's house, where there's a beautiful lake, and there's iguanas walking by, and ducks, etc. And then it started raining, so we literally got revealed back to Benji's garage, which was hysterical. I had two legendary guys, myself and my guy, filming this. We're smoking cigars in Benji's garage, which was so surreal. And so, the stories start flowing. And Manolo says, when Benji left out to this, he got a call from General Cigar. And Benji's like, I'm not going to do that. So Manolo wanted to do a project with Benji, and they were going to collaborate together on a project. But then I guess General Cigar made an offer he couldn't refuse, and he left. So Benji's like, for the first time in our lives, you are the guy that brought us together to work on a project. And I just stopped and looked, and I'm like, I can't, what? I didn't even realize that you guys had never really worked together as a collaboration. So that meant everything in the world to me, that I knew it was the right person. The fun thing about it, though, Bear, was I'm in LA now, and Benji's in Miami, and Manolo's in the DR. So trying to coordinate and triangulate these three cats with plans was hysterical.
Even now, today, still.
Hysterical because, you ask Benji a question about a cigar, and it's an hour. And during that hour, you're just, these pearls of wisdom would just get dropped on you, and you just start listening to this. And after an hour, like, Benji, did you like the cigar? And the same with Manolo. Manolo is the same guy. You can't just ask him a simple question because it's a 45-minute answer. It's to me, it is such awe-inspiring because you can't just answer a question because there's so much knowledge and history and experience. It just has to come out. That it's been a kick in the ass and a thrill for me to be involved in this project with these guys. And literally every day, I'm smoking to Benji right now, and it's just mind-boggling to me that I was actually able to get his name on a band and Manolo on a band, and that we're working together to do this. So it's so cool.
It certainly is a boon for you personally with your experience with both of them, and then also for Ventura in itself. And Ventura has actually incorporated a lot of other legendary aspects. We'll get to a different aspect, but I don't want to leave out Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. and the project that he's undertaking for you under the Archetype series, which of course I'm smoking. You're smoking a Benji right now. I'm smoking the Strange Passage, which is not the one that Ernesto did. We'll get to this in a second, but tell us a little bit about the project and why you incorporated Ernesto in it.
So, funny story. Back during the cigar boom, Ernesto gets, 92. He gets rated the top cigar.
Actually, can I time out for just a second? For those people who don't, for the 75 people that were in this room and only one raised their hand about knowing Benji Menedez, for the 75 people in the proverbial room now, you worked very closely with Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. for a long time with La Gloria Cubana.
Yeah, for 10 years. I actually was working at Ashton at the time, and I wanted to move up in my career, and my name got passed by one of my mentors, Manny Ferrara, who was the sales manager for a long time for Ryder Levine at Ashton. But we're both Philly boys, and I'd never see Manny in Philly. I'd always see him on the road. So long and short of it, he actually passed my name to Ernesto Perez Carrillo, who at this time in like 1998, 97, he moved he opened up a factory in the DR. He still had his factory in La Habana. And he couldn't keep up with production. So, I mean, between running a factory in the DR, running a factory in Cayocho, trying to be on the road promoting, and all this stuff you had to do, he needed somebody. So my name got passed. I got interviewed. I ended up getting the gig. And, again, here I am, my first real cigar brand. And I thought I knew a lot about the industry because I'd done everything at that point within the industry. Until I walked into his factory, and I had no idea what I was doing or what I was looking at. I knew I could smoke a lot of cigars and like cigars a ton, but he gave me an education about that. So Ernesto left in 2009 to start his own brand. I took over the brand, and we worked together for a long period of time. And I won't bore you with all the details of that, but when I took over the La Gloria brand, and Ernesto and I remained friends. But 5 years after that, I actually saw him in the Gran Almirante in the DR. He was picking up somebody, and I was waiting to get picked up. And he was like, Ernesto, we should just goof around and try to work on a blend together. And guess what? We did. We gave them to our respective factories at the time. Everybody loved them. And they're like, guys, you should relaunch this. So it was a cool story because it was called Reunited. I'm 5 years in a different place. Ernesto was always my mentor. I was the pupil. And now I've become somewhat of a mentor to people in the factory. And here's two different guys in two different stages of their lives, but we still remain friends. So we actually worked on the blends together, and we put them out into the universe. A year ago, I actually went to Ernesto and I said, listen, I had this cool idea that I'd love to team up with you again. And he's like, of course, let's do it. And I told him what I was looking to do and showed him the package. I don't have that with me, but he got a kick out of it because it's got a wolf with a scale with a heart and a feather, which is the dawn at dusk, the sacred scales. And then I have a beetle with its wings spread in glow in the dark. I mean, if you put a black light on it, it'll just shine. And there's a whole story behind that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And he chuckled and he loved it because he's always known that I like doing fun, creative things outside of traditional. And he was on board. So the unique thing about that is I started with Ernesto in 99. Now it's 2019. We ended up actually launching this project. And there's been like this numerology thing with us. This is our third project together. This is chapter 3 of Archetype. He left in 2008. Last year at the Big Smoke, while we were working on this, I asked him to come and help me do the rolling event where I teach 500 people how to roll cigars. And I bought him in without announcing it because I just basically said, listen, I need some help. And I want to bring an old friend, but he's also a legendary cigar master. And it was like we never missed a beat. I mean, we had so much fun doing the rolling event.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's so cool. And then, I got a call early part of this year at the TPE show that it was the first Legacy Award. And it was one of these typical calls. What are you doing Monday night? And I'm like, all right, well, there's obviously a reason why he called me. He's like, listen, this is Ben Stimson from Tobacco Business Magazine. We're inducting Ernesto into the Legacy Award. Would you do the speech beforehand? And I'm like, absolutely, I would. I'm so honored that you asked me to do that. And so here's Ernesto in the hall, and, he gets bored very quickly. And I'm like, dude, you're not leaving, are you? because I need to talk to you about some stuff. And he's like, no, I'll be here. But I'm like, listen, I gotta go up here. I can't talk to you the whole time. I set this up with his guy, David. And I'm like, don't tell him anything. And then when I started reminiscing and my experiences with Ernesto, I could see him in the back stand up, and he came up and we inducted him. So it's unique and neat for me, and I'm so blessed to be able to do this. I pinch myself because, you work with these guys and they're such great friends, but then you step back and you look at them like, God, these guys are awesome. These guys are just unbelievable. And he's one of my, dear friend of mine.
I'm trying to think, and Ernesto's been one to do. He's done a lot of amazing collaborations with a lot of different companies and a lot of different brand owners and everything. And there's some that kind of sway off the traditional path that he tends to do, especially with. I've always enjoyed it. I've always liked his packaging, so I'm not discrediting it, but this is a lot different than anything he's ever done, is the way that I'm trying to say it. So. And you said that he was captivated right off the bat from it. And
yeah, he loved it. I mean, he loves, like, when I was doing Foundry, I remember in 2014, he came by my booth. I was actually taking him through the wormhole, and he came to see as a friend and a fan. He's like, dude, this is unbelievable. This is really cool stuff. I'm like, Ernesto, you need to do stuff like that. No, I'm a Cuban sensibility. I love it. But he's done his look for such a long period of time, and that's just his aesthetic, which I absolutely love and appreciate.
Exactly.
But to have a friend who looks at the world a little bit differently and actually be able to put one of his projects in with something that's different, I think it's kind of cool for him as well. I need to ask him that question because that would be neat to hear his response. But I think he did it. And the funny thing there is, like, exactly that's what you would do, Mike.
It's terrific. So we've talked about the legends that you've worked with in the past that have kind of led to the Cuban Cigar Factory project, and then, of course, the third chapter of the Archetype series with Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. But you also work in Ventura works in some legendary factories as well. And so, as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm smoking the Strange Passage from Archetype as well. Absolutely love the cigar. Love it. What's interesting about this cigar is actually manufactured in what is commonly known as the Camacho factory. It's got a name that even I can't pronounce, and I feel like my Spanish is actually pretty good. But I don't want to butcher it, so I'll let you make the attempt here in a second. And then, of course, the other archetypes, Dreamscape, Sage Advice, are manufactured at Occidental factory, and then, of course, Initiation and Axis Mundi are manufactured at Drew Estate. So, I mean, those are some pretty amazing factories that have put out some really tremendous cigars that have really flooded the world with popularity, notoriety, and acclaim, obviously. So aside from all the personalities and the people, specifically the legends that you work with, these are some legendary places. What's it like to go into these? Like you said, you're not the guy that wants to spend 364 days, but you're still enamored with going into these places. What's it like to walk into some of these legendary locations and actually dive in with the tobacco, work with it, and eventually produce a cigar?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the other one, we did the fantasy mini series under Archetype, which is made out of the Oliva factory in Esteli.
Right.
That's another one. I mean, it's pretty cool. In my career, I got to work in 3 factories: Dominican, Honduras, Nicaragua. I was one of the first guys to work with AJ on a project under Foundry, AJ Fernandez, who's just the greatest guy, another madman scientist of what he does down there. And if you've been to his factory, he's just an amazing guy.
I actually haven't had the privilege yet, but I've been told about just how, the size, the capacity, the tobacco in itself is just incredible.
Yeah, and then the other one that we work with through one of our other brands is Cuban Rounds and Rejects, that we work with the Placencia family, which Senior is another legendary guy. So, So to answer your question, to walk into these factories, I never thought in my life I would ever be able to work with people like this, and also going to go to their factories and look at their tobacco and look at how they roll and their whole logistics operation or supply chain. I mean, I'm just like, I have the greatest job on the planet. I mean, it's so cool. But you know what's unique is that each one of these factories, I'm still learning, like, okay, this is why this is done this way, and why do you guys do it this way? And it's always a lot of questions, but it's unique to be able to walk in these factories because most people don't ever get to do this in the industry. And it's not like these factories open up their doors and like, hey, Barry, you want to make a cigar? Let's go to the Davidoff people, because they're not going to do that for you. And you know, same with the manufacturers we mentioned, it just doesn't happen. Um, and you know, because of our size of our company, it is unique to be able to have those relationships from the top to tops, where you know things are a little bit easier, and that, you know, they know that we're going to protect what we do, and we're going to protect, and we're going to give them orders for what they do. So you know, again, I keep pinching myself like, dude, I can't believe I'm going to a Davidoff factory. You know, we were just in the Drew Estates factory early part of this year, going into Placencia factories in Honduras and Nicaragua. I mean, Omar Ortez factory, which is this little hidden gem. Ernesto's factory, Quesada's factory, the Oliva factory. I mean, these are places that I'm like, okay, you guys want to do a project? And, you know, they're calling me now like, hey, what else are we going to do? I mean, it's just bizarre.
I mean, when you consider, like, let's take another really critically acclaimed company that's doing some really great collaborations in different factories, and Crowned Heads comes to mind really quickly too. They work with Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. Obviously. They work with Don Pepin Garcia, and now they are just starting to do some collaborations with Drew Estate and Willie Herrera. And you give that list off, and you're like, man, that's impressive. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And then you just, okay, so, but the dartboard that you just threw out, Placencia, Oliva, Davidoff, Drew Estate as well, Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr., Quesada. When you throw those names out, I mean, that's what I'm talking about with these legendary, not only people, but places in which some of the best cigars that we've seen in the last 2 decades in the cigar industry have been manufactured in these very places. And you get to work with the hands that literally made those cigars as well, and now are making yours. What, if I may, Michael, what's been like, if you could, what was one of the biggest surprises at one of these places that you walked into? You're like, I can't believe you do it this way, or I can't believe it's this. Do you have a quintessential moment where something threw you off guard? As many years as you've spent in factories and in this industry, where you walked into one of these places and something just kind of threw you for a loop.
You know, just very recent. We were in Ernesto's factory doing a lot of filming. I was working with my social media guy. We were looking through some film, and I missed that we actually sold a roller putting not a triple head, but like a quadruple head. And I'm like, rewind that. And I can't believe I missed it. It was when they're putting the cap on the wrapper, they don't cut it. They actually just leave a long tail. And then they just literally start wrapping it. And I'd like, oh my, and I must have watched it a dozen times. And then Ernesto has a really unique way of how he does the fillers, which I had never seen before. He was using a combination of a Cuban style and Entubado. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, this is what we're doing for you. And I'm like, well, why? You know, not that I didn't want him to do it. And he was explaining to me why he was doing it. And I'm like, Ernesto, these are 2 things I've never seen. The first one I missed. The second one blew me away, and I think that's why I missed the way that they put the cap on. But that's who I get to work with. I mean, these guys are always trying to perfect their act. They're always never satisfied, and I love that because I'm the same way. So to walk in all these factories, the care and passion and detail and the love of tobacco and the love of the people, it just puts you at ease, and it just makes you feel like one of them. Like, dude, there's other people on this planet that really give us, you know, a love back to what they're doing. And that's why you're tasting these great cigars. It's super cool. I always try to give the analogy, like if you know, and I used to be a drummer, it is like me, you know, filling in for John Bonham with Zeppelin and like calling up Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, like, hey bro, I'm going to come play drums, but you're going to go to a small club. That doesn't happen. Or I'm going to go to one of my other favorite groups is go work with Yes, or, you know, Pink Floyd, or, you know, collaborating with, you know, anybody that's like, it doesn't happen. You just don't pick up the phone and say, hey, we're going to do a project with you. That's the cool thing about that.
So the question begs, Before the question begs, did you actually ever have a drum off with Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr.?
I did not. He had a drum kit in the factory, in our offices in Cayocho, and I actually stole his drumsticks when I left to go work in the office. And for years, I said, Ernesto, his story is unbelievable. He actually auditioned for Stan Getz, who's a legendary jazz saxophonist. And Ernesto always said he wasn't great at that.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
This is how he got into the industry, because his dad called him. And Ernesto, this tells you a little bit about Ernesto. He said, I'm not going to be a great drummer. I'm a really good drummer, but I'm never going to be a great drummer. And his idols are like Tony Williams, who's another legendary jazz drummer. And then he got called back, and he's like, I need to talk to my dad. And that's how he ended up keeping Love Gloria, when his dad was going to sell it to Lane Limited at the time. And so I said to Ernesto, dude, I'm a drummer too. And he's like, oh, really? Wow. And so we would talk about music all the time and drummers, etc. And I never got to see him play. So I'm like, Ernesto, play something for me. No, I'm not going to play. So funny, we had at one of the IPCPRs in Vegas, this group didn't show up. And so they had to hire somebody, and Ernesto got coaxed on stage, and he actually played the drums. Oyo Como Va by Santana. And I was like, wow. I could see Ernesto play drums. And he was amazing. I mean, cold. Like, he had no idea he was getting up on stage. And he just sat down and, like riding a bike, man, he just started playing bear. It was unbelievable. So, no, we've never had a drum off.
That'd be something. That would be something.
I haven't played in years.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what's that? Do you know if Ernesto still plays? I think he does. I need to ask him that question next time I talk.
Yeah, occasionally he does.
It's been years. It's been years for you. Just you haven't had the opportunity, or it just the desire kind of just faded away as you kind of got more and more in work. So it's not like you have free time, but
that, and to set up a drum kit in my house, I think I drive the neighbors nuts. The other thing that you learn very quickly is that when you start, so I YouTube all the great drummers, and there's tons of lessons on how to do paradiddles and double paradiddles, etc. For drummers out there. And I look and I'm like, yeah, I don't even think I can attempt this anymore. These guys are amazing. And one of my favorite things to watch is kind of crazy, is drum and bugle course, which, if you ever watch the snare drummers, to have a group of snare drummers actually playing and beat, twirling, and actually playing some amazing, rhythms. You just look at that like, yeah, I can't do that. It's amazing. I mean, it would take me years to get this speed. So I don't attempt it.
The last thing I wanted to talk about with factories before we go into the next part was you had mentioned and this isn't a snub, but considering the notoriety of the factories that you mentioned, but you mentioned the Omar Ortez factory, yep, which we'll get into a little bit more here in just a second. But the going into a smaller place like that, what's the biggest difference for people who've never been in a large or small, or been in one but haven't been in the other? Like, what's the biggest difference that you see from a manufacturing standpoint, from a larger facility like, say, Drew Estate, or many of the general places that you've been? Of course, Occidental is huge as well. What's the biggest difference in terms of like scale or just manufacturing, to kind of boil it down for people who've never been to one or the other, or have only been to one type?
Every factory has the same issue. It's, how do you stay efficient? How do you try to maximize as much as and minimize the losses of tobacco and the efficiency of keeping a factory running? I've worked in a lot of big factories, and it was neat to walk into that factory on a much smaller scale, but the logistics and the way things are set up and the efficiency, you can see even more, because you don't have a lot of, you're a much smaller factory, and you're producing, probably not the volumes that a lot of these other factories are making, but you still have to be very efficient. And it's neat to walk in there because you can see pretty much everything without having to walk miles and miles. And you can see, like, okay, the building over here is where the tobacco is kept. Here is where we ferment in the pilons. Here's where we store the tobacco. And so you can walk around there very quickly without, all right, well, get in a car, we're going to drive a mile to another place. You get out, you walk through, and all you see is that. So it's more condensed, and you can see a lot of stuff very quickly, and you can see the logistics of the chain. It's much more efficient. So, and it's much more homier that I find as well. I mean, unless there's factories that way as well as Manolo Quesadas. I mean, they're much smaller as compared to some of the other ones we're talking about. So you can see the logistics in a better way. And it's neat. It's just, you just don't feel like, okay, I'm in a warehouse and, you know, this is where we're rolling cigars. It just has a different feel to it because you have to be that way.
Yeah, because I've actually been in only two factories, and I mean you can't imagine in terms of scale the difference. The first factory that I ever set foot in was El Titan de Bronze in Miami,
Yep.
and the second factory that I ever set foot in was Davidoff in the Dominican Republic. So, I mean, as bad as polar opposite as you can get in terms of scale and everything. But as I spent time I spent a lot more time at Davidoff and their facilities and everything. You mentioned the attention to detail, the meticulousness, the care that they take in efficiency and everything like that is beyond reproach. And to do it at that scale is incredibly impressive. Like to me, it would just seem like when you talk about like El Titan or Omar Ortez's factory, for example, like you have to take that nth degree of meticulous nature and precise, procedure and multiply it somehow, because like it, a lost, just to be idiotic about this, Michael, a lost tobacco leaf to Davidoff, while it still matters and it is something that they strive to not do, it's 100 times more consequential. It's like I said, as idiotic as that sounds, it's 100 times more consequential to a factory the size and capacity of say Omar Ortez, wouldn't it be?
Yes, but in the same scales, I think most of these factories are more logistic engineers than anything else. Because even at that scale, I mean, Davidoff's not going to lose tobacco, or Drew Estates or Placencia. I mean, these guys are masters of setting up their operations. And you don't always get to see behind the scenes of every little thing because everything is so in much grander scale. But you can see it as you walk through it. Smaller factories are unique because they have to be tight with what they're doing. And everything is right there. So you can kind of see everything very quickly and you can put the pieces together. It's just like trying to look at the sky and like, wow, there's a star there, there's a star there. I mean, they're all there. But if you were to, I guess, hone down on these stars, I mean, they're doing what they're doing, right? They're being stars and they're just going to keep churning along and doing their thing. And it's just unique to observe all these different factories, which gives me a grander scale and more ideas as I walk through these factories, like, oh, that's a cool idea. I think I can take that and I can take that from this factory and kind of, blend it into whoever the next project is. And do you have the capabilities to do that? That's the most important thing I think you learn of the scale and the competencies of X factories and what they can do and what my next project is in line. And so I get to, draft who I want to work with at that point, which is kind of cool. It's really cool.
I said I wanted to segue here, but I have another question. It just kind of popped up to me, Michael. And we're talking about a lot of these processes that a lot of these different factories do, and a lot of these legends, as we've talked about so far, as they partake in everything. Now, again, almost 40 decades, 40 years in the business, and you've built up these great relationships. So there's obviously a lot of trust and everything. When you're working with so many different factories, is there, while a lot of this is, I compare the industry to, it's a lot of friendly competition, but it's still competition. And there's a few sour apples here and there, but for the most part, on a grand scale, pretty much everybody gets along and has a lot of mutual respect for each other. As someone who comes in, as someone who's gone in and out of different factories throughout their career and worked really closely within their processes and procedures and everything, is there ever any worry from one factory to another that, oh, maybe not Michael, because we've trusted him for, 3+ decades or whatever, but somebody else that might come in and be like, we got to be really careful about, showing behind the curtain a little bit too much because we don't want any of our trade secrets to get out. Is there anything like that that's in place?
No, because there's an understanding there. I mean, I don't talk about other factories and what they're doing because It's just a code I've been brought up. I'm old school. I mean, 40 years ago, this business was completely different than what it is now. But a lot of the players are still around. I mean, the people we mentioned they've been around forever. So, we come in with welcome arms. My reputation helps, I'm sure, but it is, I don't say, hey, you should, go to one factory and say, hey, you know what these guys are doing over here? You should do the same thing. I don't do that because it's also insulting if I was to do that. Like, dude, this is the way we do things. That's why you come to shop at our factory to do the things we do. And so there's no upsetting of that. What's unique is like where our Cuban rounds are made in Acatao with the Placencia family. I mean, it's just an amazing operation. We pretty much have 80% of the production out of there. And the care that the Placencia, Nestor Jr. and Senior care about that factory, and they make inexpensive cigars for us there. It's the same level as we were making grade A tobacco. I mean, it's that care and love that you see in all these factories that we go into. The unique thing that you said, that is there any concern about that? This is what I applaud to estates. I mean, they asked me and our company to be involved in their barn smokers. And I've been to the last couple from last year, and then I've been at every one this year.
Yeah, we met up this year in Florida at Florida Sungrown.
Yeah, and so for them to ask us to come and participate because they make our Access Monday and our initiation was like, what? You want us to be there? Like, we're a little bit of your competition, and you make our cigar for it. Like, that's not about that. We have a partnership. We're friends. You should come and do this. It's good for all of us. And that's a mind-blowing concept that you just is awe-inspiring. So we support them, they support us, and being in their factories, you see why they're doing extremely well. They have great tobacco, and these guys are, Jonathan and Glenn Wilson, who runs the show, and Shauna, who's their rep. I mean, these guys care about what they do, and it's cool. It's just like working with any great band. You go work with Aerosmith, and the music that's going to come out of there is top notch because these guys have been playing for so long that they're just great at it. Right. So it's just cool to be involved with these people.
That's terrific. So we've been teasing a little bit around it, and so the last kind of segment, if you will, Michael, that we were talking about. So you've worked with legends, you've worked within legendary places, and now on the horizon for you guys at Ventura is the dawn and working with and building of another legend. And that, of course, of speaking of your latest release, the Psycho Nicaraguan that was blended specifically by Indiana Ortez, who by all accounts has been kind of pegged as like the next up and coming star in terms of the blending and manufacturing side of the industry. There's a lot of people you have a lot of people talking about her and her work specifically and what she's been able to bring to market in this release. And it's awe-inspiring to see because I mean she's still so incredibly young. And what she's able to do right out the gate is really impressive. What's it been like to work with her and kind of see this? You've kind of been along the ride in the last 40 years with some of these other legends, and they were legends even before you started working with them.
Wow.
And now this is kind of the beginning. What's this experience been like?
It's it's funny. I've learned at a young age that you should always have a mentor and you should always mentee somebody. And, when you're younger, you don't really understand that. And so there's always the master and the pupil. Running into Indiana by complete sheer accident was I spotted a talent that I'm like, you're the next star. You got the whole package of what the cigar industry needs. Indiana and her family, Omar Sr., who is this padrone down there. And I mean that in a Spanish term, this godfather of the factory, where his son, Omar Jr., actually grows the tobacco. And Nilka is one of her older sisters who actually makes the boxes for us. Her twin sister, Indira, is actually a fashion designer who's making some swag for us. We have our other sister, Amara, who's actually the lawyer and accountant. And then you have Indiana, who is mentoring under her dad, but she has her own voice of how she wants to blend. And that voice is very loud, and it's very clear, and it's very succinct. And when you smoke her blends, you're like, you've hit what your voice is in the cigar industry. You've got a signature style, what you're looking for. The other cool thing about that is I've got the family supporting her in any way they can. And her dad's tough on her, which I absolutely love because he wants her. My story about the roller, he wants her to be as best as she can. And the only way you learn this is through hard knocks and by experience. And she's got a great mentor, and I'm mentoring her to be the next star. But there's not a whole lot for me to do with her. She's making great blends for us. She has the greatest personality. She's it's like moth to a flame. I mean, she's just this bright, shining light. And every time I talk to her, I tell her, you make me smile. You just have this light around you that you just want to talk. I mean, we WhatsApp each other 3-4 times a day. Um, it's just a cool relationship that we have. And I just want her to be successful. My job is to shorten that time from, it's taken me 30 some years to get where I needed to be. I don't want her to go through that. I want her to, like, you already got all the tools. I just want to accelerate that for you. And, we're going to try to get her into the market. She's been busy in the factory. I've been traveling like a knucklehead. But she'll be coming around. And when you meet her, Barry, and you met her,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, like, whatever she says to you, what comes out of her mouth is just mind blowing. She's poetic about tobacco at such a young age. And I just look at her, and this is what it seems like to be my life. I just look at her, I'm like, how do you know this? I don't even know this. And it's the way, because she's there every day and she's going through the trials and tribulations, trying to make a great cigar. But she's got the whole package. And it's all inspiring for me to be able to give back in my career, running a cigar company and being able to pick and choose who I want to work with and who I want to mentor. I'm not wasting my time with this young lady. She's just got the whole package on. My job is just to get the hell out of her way and just give her the path. That's it.
She does have this way about lighting up the space that she is in around. That's a pretty accurate and apt description of her, Michael. I felt the same way when I met her for the first time, and she's a great follow on social media for people.
Yeah.
We're talking about social media a little bit before the show, and we've mentioned a couple times thus far. For people out there who really enjoy social media and the cigar industry, she's the perfect blend of it. She's a great follow. And you're absolutely right. She does some incredible stuff in tobacco. What I found really interesting specifically about when I did meet her at the Ventura booth this year at IPCPR was you've got a photo of Manolo Quesada, photo of Benji Menendez, photo of Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. Michael Giannini is walking around. That's nothing to sneeze at either. But yet the attention that she again commanded without being loud or boisterous or obnoxious or having lights shined upon her or anything. It was just her personality was something to be, not to be over dramatic, but it was something to behold. And when she spoke, people were listening and people were paying attention, and you can't, as much as your mentoring has done for her and for her father as well, there's some things that you just can't teach. And that's the impression that I got from her right off the bat. And it's incredible. I'm really excited to see what she's going to be doing for you guys in the future and for herself for that matter. Let's talk about this project a little bit, Psycho Nicaraguan. Now, the Psycho cigar series for you guys has been, has done well, but I think this has taken it to a different level, specifically with the blend. You got something really unique going on with it. What she's done with it specifically, she's taking a tobacco that it's not the first time that we've seen this in the industry, but it's something of a little bit of a risk, but it's something that ultimately works. And that's the wrapper it's actually made from Desflorado. So for those people who don't know what Desflorado is and how it complements the blend and everything, why don't we talk a little bit about that, Michael?
So, great question, Bear. We also had her picture up at the show. And now that you said that, I just realized that, I had the Hall of Famers up on the wall, and I didn't realize she's going to be the next Hall of Famer, which is quite cool. I didn't know a whole lot about this. The funny story is when we hired her last year over the summer, I asked her to come to California right before the big smoke because I wanted her to help me roll cigars, which we do Friday and Saturday and then Sunday, the big stage. And so she's a master roller as well. So I said, it'd be cool for you to come to California 3 days before the big smoke. Come meet the team, kind of see what you're getting into. This is new for you, so you've never been to California. So we'll take you around and just give you a sense of what it's like to have a company in California. So she shows up. She gives me 5 cigars or 4 different blends. And I just looked at her like, Indiana, what am I supposed to do with 5 cigars or 4 different blends? You know, I'm going to smoke 4 of them and I'm only going to give 1 away. You know, why can't you give me 25 of each? She goes, I don't work that way. And I'm like, why? Because I know you're going to smoke them all. Well, you only gave me 5. So this became a joke between us. So that night we go to dinner. Actually, Ernesto was with us as well. He got to meet her as well. And
Oh,
so
what was his impression?
he was blown away. I mean, you know, and then they got into their little circle of Spanish talking, and they were just like, and it was like masters to masters talking. And I'm just like, you know what? Look at this moment. It's pretty cool. And she'd known Ernesto. She'd never met him before, and she was in awe of Ernesto being there. But Ernesto treated her just like another cigar person. It was so cool to see. So we're smoking her cigar. And we had the other 3 blends there. And, you know, I have this thing called the Philadelphia nod where you just kind of go like this and that says everything. And, you know, I'm looking around and like, what do you think of the cigar? And they're all nodding like this. And that means, so Indiana's like, what do you think of the cigar? Yeah, I'm not telling you. And he goes, what do you mean I can tell you? Because we're smoking a cigar. I'm not going to tell you right now. You don't need this feedback. And she just starts laughing. So next morning I picked her up at the hotel and I had my convertible, my top down, and I started peppering her with questions like, so what was that blend we smoked last night? Oh, it's a Desperado wrapper. What? Because I had never heard of that term that she was using. It's a Desperado wrapper. Well, what about the fillers and binders? Well, here's what I did with it. So 15 minutes, I'm looking at her like, how do you know this stuff? And yet I don't even know this. So she explains to me that the way that they did this was it's a Connecticut seed that was grown in Nicaragua, and it's from 2007. And the reason she liked this wrapper was because what they do generally when you have a tobacco plant, about 45 days or so, you clip the flowers so you can push all the energy into the leaves. What they did here is they waited till about 70 to 75 days, and then they cut the flower, which makes the leaves much bigger, and the nutrients kind of flow right into the leaves, and then you start picking them.
Interesting. Okay.
And so you just learned something as well. And, you know, I'm 38 years in, and I've never heard that before. And I'm like, okay, kid, that's unbelievable. So we go to the big smoke. She blows everybody away. She's so poised. She was thrilled that we had her there. And as she was leaving, I said to her, hey, Indiana, by the way, I was looking to do a psycho for next year. And I think I just found my blend. And she's like, oh, you go. Well, that's great. And I'm like, and so congratulations. The blend you gave me is going to be Psycho Nicaragua. I'm going to put your name on the box and the band. This is your brand. And she just started crying and she got on the plane and left. And I mean, that's the way I wanted her to leave because I just believed in her. And that whole week that we were together, I'm like, this girl is unbelievable. And so that's how this blend came out of her just handing me stuff that she was working on. And I think, you know, what's unique about our company, Bear, is that we're able to do things that most people wouldn't even take the chance on. Yeah, you can't see big companies wanting to take a risk on a new roller because they have to do this and this and this. And, you know, for us, it's just like I just met her. I understood her. I understood her creative piece. I understood her passion for tobacco. I understood her mentoring. And I'm like, I'm all in. I get this. This is going to be a huge success for us. And she's just been like, she literally will text me all the time. Funny story is Tuesday I leave for Switzerland and then we're going to go to Dortmund. But our Psycho brand, we launched in Europe last year with our international director, Rick Charles, against Cuban product. And so we first launched Psycho. And it just blew up for us. And so now we're going to be in 8 different countries and we're at Dortmund. So I went back right after the trade show, July 4th, Rick and I and Patrick Ertz, our chief sales officer, and we went and I did events throughout Switzerland. And people are asking me, do you have Psycho Nicaragua? I'm like, what? Psycho Nicaragua. You have any Psycho Nicaragua? Like, how do you guys know about Psycho Nicaragua? Because we know. We watch your social media. We watch Indiana. We want to meet her. We want her brand. When are you going to bring this to town? So we're getting ready to launch that there. So our brand, Psycho, has become global. And Indiana's brand is going to become global. So to answer your question, has it helped the Psycho brand? Without a doubt. Without a doubt. She's actually elevated and brought it back onto the marketplace for us in a great way. So
absolutely sensational. Really, really excited to see what the future brings for her and with this brand in particular, but with her and the other projects that you guys have planned with her, hopefully in the future. It's got the cigar nerd in me just just geeking out just thinking about it for sure. So Michael, again, just want to thank you so much for your time this evening. But before we close out, I have, I always have this thing called the curveball segment that I throw at the end of it, at the end of my shows. It's not really curveballs; there's more like softballs. But I like to have a little bit of fun with our guests. And again, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been absolutely incredible.
Thank you for inviting me on, Bear. It's a real.
So the thing that I want to ask, as I mentioned earlier, I'm smoking the Strange Passage from the Archetype series, and I absolutely love this cigar. It's been a home run for me. This was the first year. I know it's been out for a while. I actually hadn't smoked it until this year, and it's been a very, very we talked about this word before the show. It's been an incredibly unique experience for me, just because it's something so different than I've smoked before, and I just truly enjoy it. I don't know if it's the Corojo binder. I don't know if it's the multi-international filler that you guys don't necessarily disclose, and the way that the wrapper complements it. But everything is just really, it's incredibly well balanced. The construction's impeccable. The draw is exactly how I like it. Just the slightest bit of pull, just a little bit snug. You don't want anything too tight, and I really don't like it really loose. And this cigar has it all for me. So I really am enjoying it. And I know you enjoy this blend too, because I recently was reading an article about how there was a list of cigars that basically the premise of the article was that have defined your career, so to speak. And I don't think they were in any particular order, but this cigar was on there, but in the shorter format. Before I get into my main question, what's it about the shorter format that you like in the Strange Passage?
My favorite is just the short Robusto. I was telling you on air, and I guess I'll share it with everybody. I literally a year ago, I have 18 humidors in my house, and I was looking for a cigar, and I actually was, I purchased a pair of trousers that I wanted to put suspender buttons in. So while I'm watching TV, and so while I'm sewing these suspender buttons in, I was smoking this cigar, and just like, I hate sewing, but I like sewing. But to put suspender buttons on, it's tedious because you got to put 6 of them, you got to match it, you got to measure them. This is my other passion in life, is clothes. So while I'm doing this, and I've got all these needles laying there, I'm smoking this cigar and I'm trying to sew, and I'm like, dude, how long is it going to take? How quickly can I get this done? And I picked up the cigar and I took a drag, and I'm like, what just happened? And it made me stop. And I just took a couple more puffs, and I'm like, wow, this is filling my entire palate with such intense flavors that I just stopped sewing for about a half an hour, just continued smoking the cigar, and I sat down and just really enjoyed it. So, that's what cigars do. I mean, they just stop you in your tracks when they're really great blends, and you just like, okay, you just get on, you just buckle up and you go on for the ride. So that's one of the cigars that have done it. It's an incredible. When it stops you out of your busy life, that's when you know you have something.
Yeah, when it grabs your attention and
that's amazing, right? Beautiful women, great music. You'd be walking Muzak and you hear something like, never heard that before. That's really cool. And then you get out Shazam and you figure out the group, and then you download it. It's the whole routine on Apple Music, right?
It's great to be a music lover in 2019, because thank goodness for Shazam. So you don't have to go too far before you can find out what it is and everything about the artist, for sure. So actually, this curveball segment is actually going to include 2 questions, because something else just occurred to me. But the first one is based on this article. One of the cigars that, again, I don't think they were in any particular order, but it was the very first cigar that was listed, was the Macanudo Portofino. And that's a cigar that I think everyone has heard of. Probably most people have smoked at some point in their smoking career or not, because Macanudo's been around for over 50 years, and it's been in the top 10 of cigar sales, if not top 5, for probably close to 50 years as well. What was it about the Macanudo Portofino, in your words, that helped define your career, and why is it something that you continue to go back to?
So I was a chef. My head chef at the time, we had a Pollyanna. I was a pipe smoker as well. And he gave me 10 Portofinos for Christmas. And I remember at our Christmas party, I took the cigar out. I saw this cap on it. I'm like, dude, how do you light this thing? Is like, there's no hole. I'd smoke Archa Vegas. And
How do you like this? Sorry.
and dude, you know, there's this hole. There's no hole in
There's
here.
no
Like,
hole.
no hole. So what do you do? And I asked him, like knucklehead, like, dude, what do you do? He's like, well, I don't have a cutter, but just peel with your finger. And I lit up this cigar, and it stopped me in my tracks. Like, wow, this is my first real premium cigar. Subsequently, I got to work on the brand years and years later. So that always was really a resonance to me. That was one of the seminal moments for me. That was like, man. And from there on, the pipes kind of didn't smoke them as every day as I used to. And I went more to cigars, and I went through the whole Macanudo, Partagas, Royal Jamaican line at the time, Don Diego's, et cetera, et cetera. Those were the brands around back then. Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into my next curveball segment. So if we could go back 40 years, okay. So before when you actually the time that you actually got your PhD, right? Because you actually have your PhD.
But I never got one.
Oh, you never did? Okay, you studied for one. Okay, because I was always wondering why you never went by Dr. Giannini, because I think that'd be awesome. But the question I have is, if you could go back and without question, cigars have given you a wonderful and rich life, much success, and it's been an incredible ride for you. I know, because you've told me as much. But if you could go back 40 years, and if you could decide, Michael Giannini could decide that the world would be taken over in terms of the tobacco world would be taken over to the nth degree by either pipe smoking or premium cigar smoking, what would Michael Giannini 40 years ago have chosen?
Definitely cigars. Definitely. I mean, that's what I ended up doing. You know, I've thought a lot about this as I get older, Bear. I think about all the things I've done in my life, but none of them ever resonated like the cigar industry did. I love pipes and pipe tobacco. Don't discount that. But there's more cigar smokers in the planet that is a different lifestyle than pipe smoking. And maybe this is a little bit of ignorance on my end, but I've met a lot of great, wonderful people in the cigar industry because of cigars. And they're a lot easier to open and carry and smoke. And guys are like, dude, you're in the cigar business? I'm like, yeah, bro. It just opens up doors. I mean, I've bought cars with cigars. You know, I've gotten into deals with cigars. Like, dude, I'm in the cigar business. Like, what do we need to do to get to this number? All right, I'll bring a couple boxes, and it's done. I've gotten into the greatest restaurants because of cigars. I mean, it's just incredible what that opens up. And it tells you a lot about the community of cigar smokers. I mean, we ostracize people that don't really fit in. I mean, consumers do that on their own. The cigar industry is one of the most unique things because we are all friends. You mentioned that earlier, but we're friendly competitors. I mean, we all want to see everybody doing well because it's great for our industry. And you learn this from our forefathers. I mean, Menedez was friends with Manolo Quesada. Ernesto was friends with the Fuente family, as is the Plasencias and AJ and the Oliva. You know, all these people are all great friends. I mean, it's just incredible. And they all help each other. And that's kind of the world we live in, which would help the rest of this world if we all just could get along. You know, it's kind of a cool, unique thing. I'm going to see competitors in Dortmund that are like, dude, how you doing, man? I haven't seen you. And then we'll laugh like, I saw you last week here, and now we're in freaking Germany. I mean, it's hysterical. And it's great to go to these events because you get to see your friends and like what they're up to. And there's no backstabbing. There's none of that. It's just a fun industry. So the cigars are a powerful tool on this planet.
They really are.
More people could just engage and like it. And it's a weird time we're living in right now.
The greatest equalizer on the planet is what we're smoking right now.
Yeah.
And to your point, Michael, yeah, cigars have gotten a lot for me. I haven't played for an oil change in like 7 years.
I understand that, Bear.
So, because of cigars, to your point about friendly competition and everything, I'm still reminded of this moment that I experienced in my first IPCPR trade show. It's going to be so much easier to say PCA trade show from now on, but IPCPR trade show last year. And there was this moment where Henke Kellner, Manolo Quesada, and Hochi Blanco were sitting on a couch together and talking, and nobody else was around them. I mean, there were people around, but they were at a distance, including myself. And if, man, I would have paid there. I don't have much money in my wallet, but I would have paid everything in my wallet to just sit there for 15 minutes and just take in and be a fly on that wall and just see what those three guys were talking about. And they would have probably been talking about, baseball or, weather or I don't know, but if any of that 15 minutes would have been anything about tobacco, I would have learned a universe's worth of knowledge. It would have been fantastic.
It's cool. I've been in situations where, a cigar master will walk into a factory and everything stops and they're just kind of talking about tobacco. And you to your point, you get to see, you're a fly on the wall just listening to the conversations and they're just sharing information. Hey, I'm doing this right now. What do you think of that? And then they start arguing and it's hysterical. I mean, it's hysterical to see. It's very cool. It's very, very cool.
And I think a very important lesson that you've taught us tonight, Michael, is that we can never truly stop learning about this business. I have a thirst for knowledge. I've always loved learning, particularly about things that I'm passionate about, and cigars obviously being one of those things. But I think that you've taught that lesson for all of us who might be watching and listening to this and thought, I've got this cigar thing nailed. I know X, Y, and Z. I know A, B, and C. I know the blenders. I know factories, and I know stuff like that. If Michael Giannini can admit on air to learned things from a young lady who is a star in the making, and after 40 years of experience in this business, everyone has something to learn.
Amen. Amen.
And with that, I would really, again, Michael, I just can't thank you enough. This has been sensational, truly awe-inspiring for me. I've always admired your work, your courageous tenacity, your creative nature. It's been something to see in my short time in the industry, and to see what you guys are doing at Ventura is really exciting. The people that you're working with, the cigars that you're producing, really fantastic stuff. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and so thank you to our audience for sticking with us tonight as well. We know that it's really early still on the West Coast where Michael is. He's going to go have lunch after we're done here, but for the rest of us, we're going to go to bed. But before you all do, I just want to thank one more time Michael for joining us tonight. And of course, if you guys are enjoying our show, please go to our YouTube channel, ELOSOFUMAR, go to our Facebook page, ELOSOFUMAR, and like our page, follow us. And as always, if you're listening to us on podcasts, be sure to download, subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff, so I can continue to bring amazing people like Michael and all the amazing guests that I've had in 90 takes that I've been doing this. I've just had such amazing good fortune to be speaking to truly legendary gentlemen like the man sitting across from me in the virtual world here. And it's all thanks to folks like him that I get to live this dream and enjoy these conversations. So I hope you've enjoyed it tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsors, of course, Drew Estate and Cornelius and Anthony Premium Cigars. Wherever you're listening to podcasts, you're listening exclusively because of them. And guys, as always, check out our take 91 next week. 91 with George Rico from Gran Habano Cigars. You'll definitely want to tune in for that. So thank you so much, Michael, once again. We really appreciate all those likes, shares, and comments. Keep them coming. As always, I'm Bear Duplessis live from Euless, Texas. This was ELOSOFUMARTAKES take number 90 in the books. Guess what? We'll see you next time.